Hey there, YouTube. Today I'm going to show you how you might take a raw recording from a gun session that sounds poppy and quiet and turn it into a massive, long, modern gunshot. So for an example, here's a before and after from the free Firearm Sound Library, where you'll hear the raw version. And by raw, I mean the compiled version they already had for a near fire of a 1911. And then the process version that I'm going to show you how to achieve, or how I achieved it, with a whole metric ton of plugins. And then you'll hear the AK-47 raw, followed by the processed AK-47. So here we go. Get ready with your ears. Boom. All right, so here's the plugin chain I used on the 1911. On the 1911, I also used, I added just a little Foley from some things that's just like mech, not even, just barely a thump, mostly this. It's kind of a nice thick thump to it. But aside of that, even if you mute it, it's big. So this all does a lot, and I'm going to run through processing an entirely new gun, but basically the Oxford inflator adds wave shaping and adds a nice, pleasant, big quality to the sound, makes it aggressive and more upfront, something you want with guns. Then I denoise to get rid of the bass noise floor, because eventually I'm going to boost the heck out of it, and I want to reduce the noise. Pro Q, tonal shaping. This isn't fixing, this is just general tonal shaping to make things how I want them to hear. Then transient and sustain with Transgressor 2. This is a monster on weapons, because you want your initial punchy transient to sound different on the EQ from your sustain. And previously you would have had to automate something like Pro Q3 or another EQ, or write it so that you get more tail in the region that you want in the sound. But here, it's just one plugin. You set what you want the transient to sound EQ-wise, then the sustain to sound, and you're set. Transient master, a little bit of a sustain reduction to reduce some noise and punch up the transient. Transient shaper, again, because they all sound different. This one added this nice pump feature, which you can read the tooltip there and it'll say everything I'm about to say. But essentially, if you want just this little bit of separation between your attack and your sustain, this actually is very functional in cleaning that up. Another transient shaper. What's that? That's right, more. This one's super subtle, but it's just to boost up the lows of the sound. And a little bit sustain in the mids, and I think maybe a touch less sustain in the highs where there's hiss, which at 5K. R-bass with a trick. You see it's at -24. Well, that's because I'm allowing the signal to drive it. So it's a transient envelope follower on the sound. So it's not a constant bass. It's a bass that punches as long as I tell it to, with the attack and release times based on the signal. Then low air stereo. This one is static, but it just adds a different quality of the bass, more of a sub bass than a punchy specific target frequency that our bass does. L2 to boost it up in a transparent mode, which is smoother. And this is 6 dB. Then ozone, pulling a big ton of stuff. Vintage comp, vintage limiter, and maximizer on this one. Each one has its different quality. There's a lot of weight to these vintage comps and limiters, even if they're not even compressing. And then the clipping added quite a bit to this, and you'll see there's a 20 dB, 30 dB. We're compressing and limiting the heck out of it with these vintage comps and the maximizer. This is doing the heaviest lifting so far. Shadow Hills is more of a tonal shaping with the steel quality and mid side to help the mid poke through, with a reduction in stereo width and a mono maker around the subs. This helps the sub poke through as a mono part of the direct shot, and not take up too much stereo width. And there's just a touch. We're talking 0 to 2, maybe 3 dB of compression going on. I hardly do any compression with this. This is a tonal shaping compressor in my mind. Don't like heavy compression with it. Then one more spectral denoise. And this has to be relearned after all these effects because that's how it works with the threshold. So I relearn the noise, and this is reducing all the noise that's been boosted, say 40 dB up to this point. So this is an important one. All the noise reduction I'm doing in these is simple with a general adjustment of the release and often a curve reduction. So I'm getting rid of the hiss. Again, you'll see at 5,000 and above, 5,500 and above. That's where the hiss comes in. This was tonally fine. The hiss was the problem. Do minimal reduction along the way. If your CPU can handle it, to me, it works better. I'm doing subtle reduction along the way to get rid of the hiss and tonal shape without having to hit it really hard at the end where it's probably going to artifact. Super soft clipper, limiter, not doing much. This is where I found, after boosting 40 dB, the tonal peaks that are terrible. You wouldn't have heard them in the initial recording at all. It's just a pop. There's nothing to clean up. Once you boost it, you'll find certain resonant things and issues to find. And this is my resonant fix where once you once you find it, you dial it in, click the headphones, make it a very sharp cue, go down and reduce it more here. There's two tricks you could do. You can either dial it in where you barely hear it and then kill it this way, or you can go below and then go up so it only plays as the sound plays, which masks it. Both are fine. They're just for different purposes. And another spectral denoise, very, very minimal. Could almost do without it, but it was just a touch of hiss here that was bothering me. Pro MB is doing a little bit of tonal shaping, just general expansion in the highs to get rid of more hiss and allow it to be high end while it's occurring. And expand in the middle. Again, a noise reduction that doesn't have any aliasing is essentially what this is doing. It's making room for the punchy bits, getting out of the way for the tail. And a compression for the low because I wanted to boost it up to be louder but not super transient, fatiguing the ears. Decapitator for another tonal shaping mechanism, mostly saturation. This does wonders at finalizing your sound. I use it on every gun thing I ever do. So there's your trick. A or E is pretty much the trick to go to. You can overdo this drive and then dial in the mix and it sounds fantastic. But, you know, generally stick between 1 and 3 if you're going to do it full wet. 1 and 2 is typical. These are common controls to be used. Recenter because it wasn't centered. Lindell, if you want more saturation, this is a really good one. It also has this fantastic sounding EQ. It's Pultec in style. And the analog button really makes it sound nice and analog. Then the Lindell 354E in Nuke and Nouveau mode. This did wonders on the tail and the bigness of the sound. This is a very difficult looking plugin to start with, but really it's just a 3-band compressor. And these are the crossover points. And you dial it in usually too heavy at 100% mix. Find good settings for these. Choose if you want the mid or the side on each one. What do you want to compress? Here I'm compressing the mid for the punchy element of it to make it bigger. And this thing is weight in the box. Holy cow, huge sounds. Love the 354. Go Neve. This, I honestly don't remember why it's there. I think I had it boosted and it was way too loud, so it wasn't even needed. JST clip for a little bit of extra clipping rather than fully limiting the sound. This helps things feel more transient by clipping them. The H-Delay stereo and the Stratus are just there to provide fake echoes if I cut off too much of the sound, or just for design purposes to feel a little bigger and a little more natural. And then I added Pro G simply to trim it up to look like this without having to do automation on the edit of the file, but that's really not necessary. Oh boy, that was a lot. So without further ado, let's do a new weapon. So I pulled 3 in. Just gonna go ahead and load it up. This is a shotgun Winchester Model 12 from the free Firearms Sound Effect Library, which is a fantastic resource, and good on that crew for putting this together and releasing it. It's very cool of them. And there you have it. What you have is a mastered peak, and this is basically what guns kind of sound like at a distance. Fireworky, poppy, and you can see the transient of a gun is so loud compared to the tail and what we're used to hearing in media. But we're gonna make it Hollywoodized, or game audio-ized, whatever you want to call it. How about big? We're gonna make it really, really big. So here's the same plugins I used before, and I'm going to add them one by one and dial them in as it goes. Let's do it. Oh, I better turn off all the other effects because, yep, okay, we're good to go. I'm going to let it loop and dial it in. So you won't hear this one too much. You'll hear this later, but it's the wave shaping making it punchier. Also louder, but it definitely adds punch. All right, we got to start. Let's see the noise. Profile it. Honestly, not so much on this one. Yeah, no curve needed yet. All right. Let's get into Pro Q tonal shaping. Yeah, it's going to clip until I add the clip. Let's leave the JSD clip on just so when I do these ridiculous moves, it doesn't say too bad. That's a good tonal overall shape. You know, you can't do too much at this stage because it's all blended in together. But let's have some fun with transgressor. So I'm going to start by dialing in the transient. I forgot I did do a trick with this. I did automate this gain specifically. It's a pretty neat trick. I boosted it up at the front of the sound and turned it down so it's not on all the time. Really nice trick. You can hear it in the sustain here. And without that particular trick, yeah, it's flat. It really needs that. But then if you say turn that off, dial in the sustain. Towards the end, it doesn't feel so great. So, you know, you can use the audio control sidechain. Sometimes that works. It's better and smarter to simply draw it in. You know, if you're going to be specific about this, you want to say, I want it there, 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 and I want it to come down over time. Maybe not even mask this initial shot. See, now that feels great. So that's the beginning of the transient sustain. We're getting there. Note, I had this blended at 49 from the previous preset. I usually overdo it and then dial it back. I just tend to do that because it works faster than making very small changes. That sounds pretty good. Now, we've got a good sustain. The initial part is lacking sub. We'll get to that. But I'm going to do some transient adjustments on this. Overdid it. Cool. That's pretty nice. Let's try this one as well. Now let's hear no pump. And a little pump to clear out the initial transient and the sustain. Subtle. That's pretty sweet right there. All right, now let's try to punch up this sub. Note the crossovers. And what I'm doing there is basically finding the body, the high-end hiss, and really high crisp stuff that's almost too much piercing for the ears. And I'm basing, you know, the bottom on the sub for this one. So splitting it into 3 bands. Then I'm going to dial in precise balance or loose. You know, precise. They're exactly as they sound. How loose do you want it for guns that need to feel very modern and precise? Go precise. If something's a little looser, don't worry about it, go loose. And here it needs to be precise because it's a weapon of mass destruction. All right, we've got our bass. It's the trick. Parameter modulation for sure. So let's dial in where it happens. And if anybody doesn't know how to do this, I guess I'll do that. Move the parameter modulation link, turn it on, set the audio channel, and boom, set your min volume that you want it to occur. Get a little tight. Let's get some low air bottom. Cool, that's a good start. And then we'll go to Pro L2, which is going to boost further. We might not even need that. Let's jump right to Ozone with the 3 comps. You can hear what they do. Whoops. Didn't mean to delete it. Oh, well, that's okay. I guess I messed up. Let's get the vintage comp back on. We got to dial them in anyway. Off, off, and off. All right, here we go. Now, typically with modern stuff and guns and sound effects, 3 crisp clipping. I really like 3 and 4 transient. These preserve the transients along with the toggle of transient emphasis better than any limiter I think I know for sound effects. Don't really care for it too much for music on those, but for sound effects, they're wonderful. Don't ignore True Peak. You don't need it here. We we got the clip at the end, so all is fine. Really, I'm just dialing in the overall amount of limiting I want, along with the transient emphasis I'm desiring and the character of it, which is defining how fast and slow it is. And since these have so many transients up front, slow is starting to be just fine. And let's try with that vintage limiter. We're getting somewhere for sure. It might be a little too big, so this is where I go back through and maybe turn down the transient. You know, I did things earlier before the limiting was on. Yeah. There, that sounded pretty darn good. I am now going to add the Shadow Hills Class A. As I said, steel is typical for weight mid-side to balance out the mid compared to the side. I should keep stereo width at 0 in Mono Maker so you can hear what these things do. So as I rose that, you hear everything at 2000 and below becomes mono, which really messes up the signal. But once you make this around 60 to 100, there's some magic in the sub. And the stereo width on these is really nice sounding. For music, it's often nice at 100 to 110, but here I'm just going to mess with it to see how this sounds. Usually I'll reduce it a touch. And there we go, 105. Now I'm just going to dial in the threshold on the optical and the discrete. There's two compressors in here, optical and discrete. I have it in stereo mode, mid-side, and then you have control of tone with the iron transformers that it's running through. So I'm going to start with optical, then discrete, then I'm going to the iron. Yep. Hey, who knew? Iron sounds better on this one than steel. It had enough low end to just match. So just toggle this until it sounds good, really. They emphasize different parts of the low end and different thickness, and it's just a tonal call at the end of the day. So here's with and without Shadow Hills. All right, now one more limiting. So you can hear when I solo the noise, we have a whole new noise floor. And we're going to reduce that. The curve emphasizes or de-emphasizes aspects of the noise profile based on what you find most offensive. And to me, it's the hiss of these above 5K. And if I bring it all the way up, it won't do any, and you hear the hiss. And if I bring it down, you'll hear that it's going away. So by bringing up the meat part of the sound and turning down the curve for the noisy parts, it's going to be much more clean when I hit play. Honestly, could call that a day. That's pretty darn good. Let's hear the before and after to show the difference. But I mean, it's pretty obvious. I think I overdid the R bass. Nope. Overdid the low air. It's nice and punchy though, huh? I think the range was okay. That's pretty nice. All right, let's keep going. Let's see how far we can take this to make it even bigger. Soft clipper just to add that extra bite. You can really hear it on the initial crack and the reflections, how it sounds like it's breaking up air even harder. That's how it relates to me, is just a more aggressive gun. Which I like on this one. Oh, this was way too busy. Let's go to the default setting. Interestingly, in this gun, there's not a lot of tonal stuff I want to fix. Maybe none. Okay, there might be one at wom, wom. Pinpoint it, reverse it, notch it up. And you can even hear that in real time. So that's just almost a typical EQ if I had no notch, but you can go up and you can find it, and then you can find the point at which it's audible, which is probably around there. Might need to just go. That sounds good to me. All right, so now I've got some extra tonal and fixing with EQ. Let's see. I think the highs actually might be too much, maybe a touch. But not the whole time. So I'm going to try to use this as a transient shaper and EQ. Yeah, I was thinking of the wrong range. It's more in here. And you could do a little extra sub bump if you really wanted. And I do, because it's a shotgun. That's right, it's a shotgun, and you need that boom in that shotgun. There's an extra spectral denoise. I honestly don't think I need it. I had it here for different problem solving. Yeah, maybe it's the different processing, but I don't feel that I need that, so it's gone. Pro MB, let's see if I need to shape it. I think a little bit of that noise reduction will be good, and that's noise reduction as in frequency reduction, effectively acting as noise control. So I went back there, and now that everything's super boosted, I boosted how I want the sustain to feel with the sustain plugin transgressor, as well as the shot, because now everything's much more audible. The problem is we got a big click. So I'm going to try to add a D-click to get rid of that. Now, normally you'd go back to the source, you'd find the click, and you'd remix the overall balance of the asset. I'm using the one they baked together just to demonstrate a bunch of techniques. So, you know, find your balance first, but this can work in this sort of a click situation. So yeah, it's got a lot of clicks in it, and even that much sounded okay to me. That's too clicky. Very, very close. That feels like a good compromise. Now let's get that decapitator saturation. Now I'm going to recenter it to get the overall signature of the sound centered. Previously it was all to the left, so I'm going to adjust the response to get that sounding better. Cool, now it's more centered. It's easier to tell the width of the tail, and we can adjust that earlier and later on. Now I'm going to saturate with the Lindell, see how that turns out. All right, so I overdid it, but it sounded pretty good. So instead I found where I liked the saturation tone and used the dry wet of Reaper to dial it in. And let's get to the weight, the 354. So I'm going to solo the lows to audition where I want the overall crossover. I forgot I did one more trick on this. Look, it's been doing it this whole time. I had the parameter modulation to the mix. So the initial part was punchier and then it toned down. I'm going to leave it full and you'll see why I did that, because it's aggressive. So you can hear that sort of has this problem with it, that it's just too much the whole time. So, you know, you can automate that with parameter modulation or draw it in the track envelope. Probably do a similar thing here. You want to boom, 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 bring it down. Wild bar part guess. No, it was cool, right? Hitting that peak. Yeah. Then dial down. Pretty nice around there. Okay, I overdid that, but come on, it sounds nice. Now I'm going to do a denoise because you can hear, again, the noise is coming back through in the mids. And I should be able to scrub that and get that after the 354. That junk. And I also want to curve it to get rid of this particular hiss. Oh, it's like right here. And I want it to smooth. It's probably like that. Let's hear that in context. Too much. I want to turn off all these because they add that hiss. Get the release low. Nah, not multi. Doing too much here. Yeah, it's going to do that. So I'm going to use Pro MB instead. I'll probably bring that back in, but I could also just dial this mix back a touch. It's probably a bit much. I mean, that's really introducing it. And I could also ride the gain of this, which is probably the smarter move over time. Because when something's nice, at one point, oh, it's a step knob. Darn it. Yeah. Instead of that, I'm going to do Pro MB. I could do this with Pro Q or anything, but I'm going to just do Pro MB. I'm going to find it, dial it back. And this is where you expand and you can key it to the important part of the signal. So I'm going to expand the range of probably, I think it's around 8 to 6 dB, and I'm going to use the threshold to determine where that is, but I'm also going to do it based on a free band that is outside of the noise range. That's right where the shotgun is super meaty, and it looks to be. You could do there, but I'm doing it. Actually, I might just want to do the hiss, so I'm going to position it where you can hear the hiss. I'm going to do it right there. So that's going to be the trigger. No more auditioning the side chain. And I'm going to dial it in. So I think I overdid one spectral denoise. Yeah, I'll have to be careful with them. I'm doing a little too much. You can hear that hissy bit. Got to be careful with that. I can deal with that later. I'll change the algorithms, but this is the basic idea, and you can hear where things are going. That's pretty close. That's pretty darn close. L1 to bring it up and just round it out, which it doesn't need. The J-clip did it all, and by having it in that order, it's all good. And finally, an H delay stereo, if it needed echoes in a Stratus just to add width. I think there's enough echoes in this area. It doesn't need any more echoes. But I'll add it so you can hear what it sounds like. Go dry, add a high pass filter and a low pass to make it sound naturally like it's falling off, no feedback. Just like that. Then you got to time it out, just whatever sounds natural with the recording. And analog off typical, so you're not injecting noise, but 2 and 4 are pretty cool. And so if your tails are lacking, just do something like this. You know, you want more high end in your tail and you want it to punch through, that's cool. To me, that sounds nice and open. And just a touch of Verb just to make it feel a little bit more real. You can try all sorts of sounds for this. So I'd call that good enough. Let's hear the before and after. All right, and that start to finish is the boring methodology of making a sound, a poppy firework kind of gun, and taking it into a modern game audio Hollywood territory. So that's a whole lot of plugins. If you've got questions, please leave them as comments. I'd love to chat about this. I don't think a lot of people do it live because it's kind of boring to watch so many plugins, but I hope I explained it all well. And if you've got your own processes you do, I'd love to hear what you throw on to make guns much, much bigger. Thanks for stopping by.